Spirit of Matter episode, and the news provides some interesting stuff. And let's just check the news article about that because I'm sure if we're checking Germany in the news, we will have interesting stuff. And this is the self-proclaimed kingdom that doesn't recognize Germany. That's the BBC phrasing. The Guardian, celebrity chef among suspects in Germany, right-wing coup plot. Sky News, celebrity chef Frank Heppner. I wonder if we're going to have his chart. Is suspect in Germany far-right coup plot, according to reports. So this is as of 2 days ago. Basically, some right-wing guy tried to overthrow the German government. And that is what in journalistic language is called a sexy title. I figured that it's going to be a great time to delve into some mundane astrology. And mind you, I am learning together with you about how to even look at the chart of a country. And I'm learning this hands on, and you're very much invited to delve into the data with me. So, first of all, let's see if we have the chart of this Frank Heppner, natal chart, Frank Heppner. Um, okay, let's go to all. Heppner. Oh, I wrote it incorrectly. Okay, natal chart. No, not really. Nobody knows. So let's go to Germany. And for Germany, we have one chart that is from 1949, and basically after the wars, 24 May 1949. Now, because this is a bit of a putsch attempt, and because we are referring to astrological times that were before 1949, I was thinking, I'll look at this chart later, but I was thinking to see if I have an earlier chart, and I do. There is a chart from William I as the German Empire, January 18, 1871. And funnily enough, this chart is in Versailles, France, so I don't know how useful it will be. And it's German Empire 1871. And there is another chart here that I'm not sure about. Here there is the Weimar Republic, August 11, 1919. And the Third Reich of January 30th, 1933. In Berlin. So the Third Reich, I think, is too late. We are either going to go for the Weimar Republic or still look at the 1871 chart. And I'm going to play a bit of a human ephemeris here to see what are the transits that are going, like the Germany is going through. So if I think about a putsch attempt, I might want to look at the Weimar one first. Let's see if the 1990, I think. Okay, this is the 1941, and this is the one we saw later. This is the 1933, and this would probably be the 1919. But for some reason, it's written German Empire 1871. So I don't understand. Probably it relates to this chart. I'm looking at this one. So ignore the German Empire here. This is from August 11, 1919. Why am I looking at this chart? Because if I talk about overthrowing the regime and overthrowing a democratic regime, I'm referring to a time where Germany had a sort of a kind of a democratic regime or a sort of a regime to overthrow. And I'm looking at the Putsch attempt for a new democracy, and I think the Weimar one would be the most correct chart to look at if we are trying to learn from the cycle. I think the 1933 was already after, after a putsch, a successful putsch overthrowing of the regime event occurred, so that would probably be too late. And the 1949 one, I will look at it as well. because it's probably very relevant for Germany today. But I want to look at what happened here in 1990. So this is Weimar Republic, and that would put the ascendant in Libra. And with Mars here in 26 Libra. So, and that would put Scorpio in the second house, and Taurus in the eighth, with Pluto in the eighth. And that would mean that the current transit that we're having with Uranus is right conjuncting that Pluto. Quite interesting. And that means it's also, well, it's not trining the IC here, but definitely conjuncting that Pluto in the eighth house. Okay, and we have Rahu there. Nothing smart to say except that Uranus is conjuncting that Pluto. Uranus is about revolution. It is about overthrowing something, but in overthrowing something in power, it doesn't seem like a regime. So let's see. Maybe this chart is useless for now. You know, this is also a possibility. Major transits that we have is also in Capricorn, and Capricorn here is in 1, 2, 3. It's the fourth house, with the sun. So, but then, you know, there is Mercury there, that Pluto applies to conjunct to. I don't know. Can be useless. Perhaps we would like to look at the chart for 29 or something like that. That might be more useful. But first, let's take a look at the modern chart of Germany. Okay, I tried that. That seems like it just doesn't seem so useful. I know that there is Lilith opposition in Pluto, in Cancer, but Lilith is like at the end of Cancer. If Lilith is where Uranus is right now, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Doesn't seem like a Lilith thing. So, let's take a look at... Okay, this is interesting. We have two charts. One chart is Federal Republic Proclamation, is 23rd May 1949. And then we have another one in 1990. And that is the reunification of Germany. So I'm kind of tempted to go to the reunification of Germany chart, but that would mean I'm looking at the country with the chart from the 1990s. That would make Germany a lot more new. That like it feels to me that a bit counterintuitive, but I'm gonna go with it and see what that gives me. That would put the 10th house in... Wait, because I want to look at the ascendant. So we have the ascendant here in Leo. That would mean Cancer is the 12th, Gemini the 11th, and Taurus is the 10th. That seems more like it, because that would mean that Uranus is going over the 10th house of Germany, and is now, yeah, and that would mean that Rahu is there, and that would mean that there can be attempts to overtake the regime, the current regime. Now, we had Angela Merkel transitioned to the current prime minister, and that happened around last year. So there's a new prime minister, and Angela Merkel is no longer ruling Germany, and she was ruling Germany for quite a while. So that was a different, you know, transition, a democratic transition. relative to, a putsch. Of course, democracy is, all relative. I don't know exactly the internal affairs of Germany, but now we have basically a putsch attempt coming from someone who is a chef. So that is quite interesting. Um, the ruler of that 10th house is in the third house. Venus is actually in Libra here. So Leo, Virgo, Libra, third house, the first degree of Libra. Um, she's actually positioned strangely. She's trining the North Node, but squaring Saturn. Is she squaring Saturn though? Because it doesn't seem in orb. No, it's not Saturn. It's absolutely not Saturn. Neptune, sorry. She's squaring Neptune. And that's just for a natal chart. Neptune is the dissolution of something. I have to admit it doesn't look well because that means either that the reunification of Germany in the 1990s was something that will eventually be dissolved, so the reunification will be dissolved, or that the people in charge, Venus, which is interesting because we did later have, quite later have Merkel, and Merkel is a woman that was the ruler. Um, but the square to Neptune dissolves things, so it tells me that there can be a cycle of dissolution for the regime of Germany. It's something I actually was not expecting to see. And the moon is growing at the time of this chart. It's about to become a full moon. So the moon is squaring Mars and is opposing Mercury. Um, a moon in Pisces. Well, but the Venus in Libra is okay, but the square to Neptune kind of troubles me there. Let's see what else do we have here. Let's look at where Capricorn is in the sixth house here. Now, sixth house is both service and open enemies. I know seventh house is a bit more like equal enemies, and sixth house can be a sort of open enemies. Um, I don't have anything smart. Maybe Pluto is at the end of Capricorn. Other than that, I don't have anything smart to say. Venus ingressed today into Capricorn, but the putsch was 2 days ago. So again, nothing smart to say there. Well, I'm trying to think of where the moon is because we had a full moon. Okay, this is interesting. They have Mars in Gemini in the 11th, and then we had a full moon on that Mars, on that natal Mars, and Mars is currently has currently passed this position, so it is retrograde, and they're having a Mars return. So yeah, that can mean that can denote that event, because that was 2 days ago, and it was right when the moon was full, applying to be full moon. Mars does Mars does trine the sun here, and the sun in the chart of a country, I know it's also related to the rulership of a country, and the sun in Libra is not in a happy place. She is yeah, she is opposite the sign of its exaltation. So Aries is the sun's exaltation, Libra is fall. So and the sun in the third house both tells me that I think it is about the role of bureaucracy, because the third house is something that we do daily. and it's also the arrangements that we do daily, but it's the type of bureaucracy that we do daily. So I know that the bureaucratic system for Germany is very elaborated. The members in the parliament change, and there's a great emphasis on representation and the decentralization of power. So it's a very bureaucratic regime. That in itself does not lend a third house, but the third house position can contribute to that. That it's something. It's a regime that you have to put effort to every day to make it successful. You're only as good as your last, as your last day in performing. Um, and that can be a very weak position. The sun is traditionally rejoices in the ninth house, which is the house of worldview. It's the house of philosophy. It's also house of travel. I don't know how that plays out for a chart of a country, but the third house is that it's that thing that you have to grind every day to keep going, and that is a sign of grinding, or the people in the regime grinding. But I think it has actually contributed to the relative supportive political culture in Germany, in understanding politics, in understanding, in taking part in politics, in being involved, especially with the history, but in taking the daily responsibilities as citizens to understand what's going on in the political sphere, and be active. And if here that requires the people in charge, or the people who are representing, the prime minister or the government, to do something every day to maintain their position. The moon in Gemini, the full moon in Gemini, was trining that sun, so it was not endangering that sun necessarily. And the Mars return was also not endangering that sun. So if I just take a look at this chart as a chart of the reunification of Germany, yes, Saturn is still lending us some attempts to revolutionize, attempts to renew, but this one is coming from the right wing, and it kind of, puts to question, can Germany withstand another attack from the right wing? And therefore, I would like to see something return, like a big cycle, because this is something, we understand that Germany, let's look at the chart of 1949 in here, because this is why am I looking at this chart? Because this chart is where Germany has founded itself after the war, right after the war. And the political changes that took to the regime structure after the war were meant to ensure that no one person can suddenly take over the regime in a non-democratic fashion. Also, democracy in Germany is not like, it's not just a word that you spit out. It's something that has a certain historical, I don't want to say baggage, because baggage is negative, and this time this is actually serving a positive means, because the notion that you don't want, not only you don't want the regime overthrown, but also you're not everything can go into your democracy. An extremist right-wing party cannot join the parliament. There are restrictions over what opinions are democratic and what opinions are against democracy, and those opinions do not have place in the political system. Therefore, the right wing, that chef or whoever he was, he had to do it not from within the system. He couldn't, he couldn't gather a party, because there would be a lot of limitations over the ability of that party to be a part of the parliament, because they don't want to do Hitler again. Okay, they don't want to do the Nazis again. Nazi regime was devastating not only for marginalized society but for Germans themselves. However, it doesn't matter how far back your ancestors are. It was not something that all in all, it was not something that was beneficial for Germans, not something that's looked at as something to return to or something to idealize. So let's take a look at where the heck am I? Oh, there it is. So the 1949 is basically the first regime in Germany that was supposed to be as bulletproof as possible to any overtaking of extremist right wing, whether democratically or not. And now let's look at what is in there. So we have an ascendant in Capricorn that would make Libra the 10th house, and we have Neptune in 12 degrees in Libra, and it is again ruled by Venus. Venus is in Gemini in 12 degrees. Venus is where Mars is right now. So of course here is another indication where when Mars reaches that 12th degree, goes over this degree or retrogrades over this degree, there is an attempt to challenge, okay, the regime. Because Mars and Venus are antithesis of each other. So Mars going over this degree can mean an attempt to basically penetrate the parliament or challenge the regime or sever the regime or do something that is of a malefic nature. Mars is not the most difficult planet in this chart. The sun is below the horizon. That would make it a nocturnal chart. And that would mean Saturn is more the planet to look into for malefic stuff. Saturn currently is approaching its Saturn opposition to this chart. Again, not something that Germany, born in 1949, has not seen in the past, not a transit it did not see in the past. And there are still about 7 degrees to go for that opposition phase. So, however, we do have here a lot of fortune at 25 degrees. And Saturn is 3 degrees away from the lot of fortune. So that can mean the well-being of the country, the fortune of the country. That can mean, because it is Saturn approaching that degree, that can mean a financial crisis, for example. And why am I saying that? Because Saturn is the more difficult planet for Germany to deal with. So it can bring, that sort of stuff. And of course, Aquarius is in the 2nd house. For a personal chart, that would mean the wealth of the person that you get from your skills. I think it can mean the GDP of a country, but I'm not sure about that. Or at least the type of economy that the country has, or the wealth of the country that comes from either its natural resources or the skill of its people. Relative to 8th house, which can be the debt or the loans or businesses it has, like import or even, I guess export would probably be the 2nd house, and import would probably be the 8th house. So that's the sort of resources that you get from another. And so that Mars, like if I look at the last 2 days in this chart, it seems like something activated by Mars. Let's compare it to the previous chart. That Mars was trining Venus, so it was not something that I would worry too much about. And here there's a conjunction that is more of a malefic effect, but it's not the most problematic. So that can mean, one possible interpretation is that Germany was successful in constructing its parliament system and regime system to any attempts to overthrow the government or overthrow the regime in an aggressive way. So at least when it comes to an attempt to putsch on Germany, as long as the person cannot get into the parliament and cannot have a party from within the parliament and is trying to attack from the outside, or trying to get to the regime or trying to do something, then that was not successful. And there we have an event where there was another attempt to challenge the German regime after 1949, and no, this is not. So this is something that can be actually a good omen for Germany. Uh, I think that it's not enough because Pluto is heading towards its second house, and so Germany will be more and more dependent on income coming from the eighth house, which is where Pluto is in this chart, and also Saturn is the more problematic. So Germany is entering. As of March this year, 2023, a situation where a planet of deep transformation, sometimes through crisis, many times through crisis, is entering the part of their self-sustainability as a country in terms of resources. And all the while, Saturn is, before that, is slowly approaching the lot of fortune. And because Saturn is the more difficult planet for this particular chart, the prediction is something like a financial crisis, something where, I don't know exactly the GDP of Germany, but we are looking at the situation where, there's problem with crops, closing farms, all the environmentalism that's closing all kinds of farms. Is this happening over in Netherlands? But Germany is not exempt from that, and that's spreading. So, and Saturn is agriculture, so there can't be a famine, I think it's called. There can be a crisis around also technology and hacking, because Aquarius is mass technology. So there can be a certain crisis to the resources of Germany, to the ability to self-sustain. Um, all the while, when Germany would try to go, if the second house is not doing well, you try to compensate from the eighth house. But this chart does not yield such easy results, because you go into the eighth, you're going to Pluto, and you're going to Saturn again. And so that is going to be a very trying time, very challenging time for Germany. And then there can be a lot more vulnerability. But right now, Germany is not vulnerable enough for that right wing to overthrow the regime. So, in as much as changing the structure of the parliament, in as much as changing the political culture, in limiting the ability of any extremist right wing to take over the parliament from within, or to be elected into power, that is so far taken care of. However, the challenges of a resources crisis can make Germany a lot more vulnerable overall. Um, and that, of course, can affect everything, including the regime. And the wealth of the nation and the well-being of the nation. I know that Germany is arming now and strengthening its armed forces. Mars here is in Taurus. Okay, like Mars here is in Taurus, but then I don't know. It can, like, is there a chance of militant regime or military regime in Germany? Yes, there is. There is a danger from this chart. There is a danger because Mars is in Venus ruled sign, and Venus also rules the 10th house, and that tells me that there is the presence of military related to the people in power or the people who are in the regime. And that is a very problematic position for a chart of a country that wants to have a people-based regime rather than an army militant-based regime. It also tells me that the army is not exalted, right? Mars is its detriment because it is at home in Scorpio. The sign opposition to the sign that it's ruling is a sign of detriment, and Mars in Taurus, while being very frustrated, and it doesn't mean that it can't be strong and it can overcome this challenge, but it's not the easiest for Mars. So any military activity is not something that comes naturally. And again, it's not the easiest for Mars. Let's look at the 1990s chart. And there we have, there we have again, we have, I believe that would still be Taurus because the ascendant here is in Leo. That would make Cancer the 12th. No, that would make, yes, Gemini the 11th, and that would make Taurus the 10th house. And still ruled by Venus, but Mars is in the 11th house. Not ruling, not making any aspects to Venus. So this is a chart. This is a chart that is more bulletproof to a militant regime in itself. So that is less evident in the 1990s chart, your reunification of Germany, which I think is also very relevant. All in all, if I try to analyze the putsch itself, like I call it a putsch because it was an attempt to overthrow the regime, I see it as something related to the Mars return here, both in the 1990s, in the 1990 chart. Let's take a look at here, or alternatively as a Mars conjuncting Venus and Gemini in the 1949 chart. So it is Mars related. In neither of this chart is Mars the more dangerous or the more malefic or the more difficult or challenging planet for Germany to deal with, which is interesting because previously Germany was invaded. Okay, so Germany had to deal with invasion previously, and this chart is actually more of a Saturn, more of a Saturnian challenge. And let's look at what's upcoming for Germany according to the 90s chart. Well, she pretty much dealt with all the Pluto stuff in the 6th house, and Germany did suffer. Again, we have Saturn in the 6th house. In Capricorn, Germany absolutely suffered from the effects of the 2008 crisis. Although they gained power, they gained position, but they gained the kind of power that would paint them in a very gloomy picture. Like Merkel had to go through extreme transformation herself. I'm not going to look at her chart right now because it's less important. But they're pretty much over with the Capricorn stuff. The Pluto Capricorn stuff, they're pretty much done with that. So that's something that's less disturbing. I believe this is Rahu. Yes, it is Rahu. They are heading, when Pluto is going into Aquarius, it's not right of March, but for this chart, when Pluto is going into Aquarius, remember the 49 chart, as of March, Pluto is entering the zone of something that could cause a financial crisis, a crisis to the self-sustainability of a country. But this one, the 1990s puts Aquarius actually in the 7th house. And that can actually mean confrontation with another country. It can be a technological confrontation, it can be hacking related. And there I said, if we look at the 49 chart and we look at the 1990s chart and we say hacking, then that is something that could cause problem for the self-sustainability of a country, as well as an actual confrontation or an actual direct conflict, technologically based, with another country, or a country that has Aquarius, ruled by Aquarius, or has Aquarius prominent in her chart. But this is also where Rahu is, and the Pluto Rahu is going to enforce Germany to step into where they're heading as a country. If I take a look at this Rahu, this means that this country has a lot of international relations, one-on-one international relations, which is true. Germany became the big boss with everything concerning IR in Europe. It's one of the most prominent countries in the European Union. And therefore, it is also blamed whenever there is a crisis. If everybody points their fingers at Germany. So, in a very short while, Germany gained a very important status in the European Union as a rule setter, as a trendsetter, as a person in charge, as the responsible adult figure, and therefore they are having a lot of international relations. If you take the history of this country, you understand this is a country that went through something that plenty of countries did not go to in that extreme harsh environment. You can think of other countries that are currently going through these and try to think of them as, liberal democracies, and an algorithmic regime system that does not allow for any decentralized system in the, I don't know, the X years, and them having that experience and that historical background that allows them to have a big reality check and to manage wealth and manage international relations, and perhaps even be more trusted because they had to go through what other countries didn't have to go through. So Pluto here is going to bring in a crisis where Germany has to take, charge. If I look even at the Ukrainian-Russia war, then the European Union, and I spoke about this in previous videos, the European Union has a very decisive approach. They were backing up Ukraine with everything, completely supporting of Ukraine. And if you think about, NATO, it's not that NATO is not doing military action, um, but the type of backup that was given was almost disproportionate to the European Union itself. Like I think it's fair to say. I think it's not a controversial saying. This is not a bunch of countries that had a lot of operations in the last I think 30 years. Um, but then again, it's not it's Europe in general. It's not a country with lack of histories in military operations and so on and so forth. So keeping in mind that Germany is a major player in the European Union, we can understand that a lot of that backup for Ukraine came from Germany, and we understand that Germany is now developing its army further. So that support in Ukraine could contribute to the interest of Germany. And that taking a very clear stand that became the European Union stand was, you know, it served a lot of interest, a lot of military interests, and it became a certain step that I don't think can be ignored. But this is that stand of the European Union had to be backed up by military action, and we may with Pluto entering Aquarius, approaching, coming to conjunct that Rahu of Germany, of this chart of Germany, the latest, that might enforce not just Germany, but the entire European Union to back up its words with foots on ground, which is what everybody is so concerned about, rightfully so. And here we see a player that's heading for a crisis way of evolving into their Rahu placement. And Rahu is where we were heading. It's where we also crave to go, whether we like it or not. And, you know, there are many implications to that, and there are many ways that Germany will be seen if and when that happens. Conjoin that with the possible resources crisis, because I don't think we can completely ignore the 1949 chart. Um, like the combination of having to rely on military action to kind of prove your power in the international sphere and back up your words and back up your support in freedom, in all many values, right? Many good values, but you have to back it up with military action. And the conjoining of having to do that and the possibility of a self-sustainability crisis is not looking pretty, all in all. So that is more where they're heading. Neptune is going to enter Aries. I don't know. Neptune is currently in the 8th house. I don't know. Entering Aries is the 9th house. Like maybe I'm missing something big here. Well, yes, I am missing something big here. Neptune is a worldview, and that can be an ideation of war that prevails around, the country and its people. Of course, I was missing something big. Again, it does not add any calmer tones to the already quite noisy, you would say, ceremonial. Uh, like those screeching voices of needless, well, I wouldn't, it's very difficult to say needless, but those screeching voices of a very it's not the country having to go on, any situation where a country has to go on a war and has to put many other countries in war, all the while losing its self-sustainability. And fighting, and then you have fighting for freedom, for individuation, for all the good things in the world, and Neptune kind of being in a war sign, so spiritual causes for war and whatnot, and war philosophies, war religion. Like, it's not looking pretty. Um, Uranus in the 11th house. I don't know, maybe like a stock collapse, but yeah, like I don't know. Um, it's going to touch on Mars, so which rules the 9th house. So it's just going to add a bit more reactionism to the mixture. Um, this is according to this chart. So all in all, if I take a look at the current, like what happened 2 days ago, it's not like that should not that in itself should not be the concern. But there's just a billion of other things that are not going to make it any easier. Um, and that is more the concern. So Germany was quite successful in bulletproofing its regime to putsch attempts by extremist right wing, but Germany is still heading to be in a prominent force in an international sphere that would have to back up its support in a country that is in a conflict with another country with foots on ground. Whether we like it or not, it might be a bit of a technological hacking and that, but everybody that knows that this kind of conflicts, they're not just managed from a distance, however technologically developed we are. And the fear of boots on ground, of European boots on ground, of tremendous crisis and ideation from this financial crisis is something that unfortunately um, is very likely to be. So you're worried about one thing, and then you take a look at it, not looking pretty. Um, what would be a word of, you know, well, I guess what can be done? What can be done? Well, at least don't make it any harder on the people who are growing food. I think is the first thing. Um, that's like, at least not make it any harder. I think is the one thing that can be done. Um, the situation with Ukraine is very, very problematic. Germany has absorbed a ton of refugees from many, many conflicts. And still absorbing refugees from many, many conflicts. This is not just Ukrainian refugees. You have to understand it's Russian and Ukrainian refugees that, of course, have some baggages around each other and have to be in the same, shelter and eating the food provided by the government. That's the situation of refugees, and you also have to take that into account. These are people whose nations are at war with each other. And sometimes you have brave unions and understanding that the people are the people and the regime, but not always. And those people have to sit in the same cafeteria, being hosted in the same shelter and being in the same line for the food vouchers. So that's the reality of war refugees. Um, and that's happening everywhere. It's across the board. Any country that absorbs refugees, and we have to. Um, what else can be done? Well, Germany is actually quite good in rejuvenating energies. I think that is being done, and I don't think that like. Sometimes you have to say what's working. So more of that. Um, yeah, it's like and of course, technological warfare, which I believe is again is something that's already being done. So as much of that confrontation that can be technological, perhaps that's the road to go. But we see with all the good things that can be done, it's not like I can say something that if you do that, then you don't have to deal with that, and then and that is not something that any person in Germany can be blamed for. Um, I think it's a country that has known a lot, and in terms of the political culture, is very much aware. Um, yeah, we understand that all kinds of extremist ideologies can form in times of crisis. It's nothing new. Every person is seeking a sort of spiritual salve from their like to do or just a different point of view that can make them coming to terms with a certain situation when that happens. Um, so all in all, the situation is quite difficult, and uh, that's pretty much where it's heading. If you ask what's the point of that, I have to admit, I like, pardon my German, there is no point. Because we've been through this, one country gets into a conflict with the bigger country, and then all the entire Europe joins the conflict because they vouch for that country, and now we're doing that again. And then you say, what is the right thing to do? You don't want to let this country go, wither away, because then you have to deal with the circumstances. But then, if you do back it up, then you have a very big war with very big nations, and what can you do about it? So it seems quite a pointless cycle. It doesn't seem like there are any decisions, and then there's the thought that, okay, we're not going to vouch for any country. That splendid we all know how splendid isolation ended for the United States, right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So and the world invasion fighting the greatest forming empire of the time, that was the Third Reich. So times are times. I guess it's something to say about that. Um, it's just like a circuit. Can you think about an algorithm that reboots that not reboots, but that neutralizes that sort of conflict? I don't know. With smart as and wise we are, progressed we are, or whatnot. I don't know. Um, why do you need that? I don't know. If I think about you know the changes that are happening, Germany had a woman chancellor. They had quite okay welfare policies. People are quite aware, quite informed, quite taking part in, very much supportive of rejuvenating energies. Like you can't really say that there is a huge change that this country, for example, with the Third Reich, yes, to become a democracy and to have people believing in democracy, not across the board, then there was this huge crisis. Even though if you take a look at Weimar between two wars, you can see that there was a lot of liberalism, there was um, a lot of consumerism, but also a lot of rich culture. Probably some of our greatest inspirations are people that were that came from the Weimar between two wars, Weimar Republic phase. So it's not like you say, if I take a look at the Sibley chart for the United States, I can say, well, I take a look at how the situation for women, the situation for children, something has to change. And sometimes those huge conflicts, they are the ones where, like between exiting the Exodus from Egypt and the foundation of the Promised Land, there was the saying that the generations had to change so that people will be ready for the new for being in Israel or Palestine or whatever that region was called back then, the Promised Land, uh, and those are the kind of things where you can say, well, there is a spiritual cause for this big chaos, so something new can be formed, and the people that were not adaptive or that were countering the new are no longer with us. But here I just specifically, if I take a look at the chart of Germany, I don't know. I just don't like. They seem to have tried to do a very hard work of doing a lot of things better. Even Angela Merkel, if you look at Angela Merkel of 2008, she has transformed dramatically. She understood that if she acts this way with Greece, she's doing nothing for her country. She's doing nothing for Greece. So that was a transformation that this person has went through um, throughout these years. I'm not saying she's excellent, but you could really see that they did a lot to change, to grow, to adapt, to transform, to pay attention to everything, whether it's refugees or environmentalism or welfare or technological advancement or even military advancement. When you think like, okay, well, now we need a military. So, and the coins, it's not something that you can say, well, they were stagnant in this, and because they're stagnant, there has to be like a big chaos for everything to change. Um, maybe I'm uninformed, but it doesn't seem like it. If you ask me, is there a point to that? I say no. It's pointless. It really is pointless. So. But that's just the way that this is the way that we are all a part of a nature, and then that nature transforms and evolves and has processes that there is large scale and small scale, and there is a part of the evolutions of the galaxies that manifest in nature and inhabitants and in politics and social sciences. So yeah, that was mundane astrology episode for the day. I do, if you want me to do more of this, or if you have special things that you want me to take a look at, you can write in the comments below. I don't bite. So, and yes, for more, you can subscribe. I have two other channels that I'm trying to promote to see a social experiment of what would it look like. I elected them with the new moon in Sagittarius, and one is Jupiter rising Shirley, the other one is Shirley Talley, a real dreamer. And I just want to see what aspects of me will come out and how will it go. And I need more subscribers so that I can do lives there as well. So that's optional. If you wonder if I'm doing readings, then yes, you have to contact me for that. Have my contact information. Try the Instagram one because I have not logged on to my Twitter account in a while. So yeah, that option's still available. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.